Whether you're watching Lost or playing retro video games like Myst, the entire concept of the castaways on a strange island where seemingly magical events keep happening to them, that's pretty much owed in large part to Jules Verne's Mysterious Island, which just happens to function as a sequel to 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Just ask Rand.
So much of that was informed, at least at the beginning, from kind of the book that inspired it, which was, I think, Jules Verne, Mysterious Island, which was you land on this place and it looks like it was inhabited. You get hints that there was people here, or there's a person here, or there's something here, but you're intrigued by it. It doesn't seem to fit in an island in the middle of nowhere.
Welcome to Chapter 3 of the series I'm calling The Mysterious Nemo. If you're just jumping in here, you should know that we discussed author Jules Verne and the character of Nemo in Chapter 1. In Chapter 2, we covered all the adaptations of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Right now in Chapter 3, we're going to look at the sequel to 20,000 Leagues, The Mysterious Island, and the various incarnations over the years. This is easily the longest chapter, so grab a snack, get comfy. We're going to the island.
I'm stuck with you. But we're gonna have some fun.
Now, the first thing to know, these are two very different kinds of stories. 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea is truly a character study on Nemo himself, his philosophy, and how he saw the world. The adventure and the reveal of the Nautilus and the submarine voyage are all unique to the book. Mysterious Island, however, is an entirely different kind of adventure, one that Verne was already familiar with, having penned the novel In Search of Castaways at a time when Robinson Crusoe and the Swiss Family Robinson were trending. Mysterious Island was another of those survivalist genre pictures with a twist.
Well, it's slightly more complicated than that, I'm afraid.
Well, you're right. In fact, Mysterious Island isn't just a sequel to 20,000 Leagues, it's also a sequel to In Search of Castaways, which was also made into a Disney film about a brother and a sister looking for their parents who were aboard a ship thought to be lost at sea. In the story, they encounter a pirate ne'er-do-well type named Tom Ayrton, who also makes an appearance in The Mysterious Island.
What did he say?
Well, in the first novel, Ayrton is basically the bad guy, and without giving too much away, he negotiates at the end to be marooned on an island rather than face justice. So when we get to the Mysterious Island, he's the resident crazy guy on the island, and he actually redeems himself. In fact, redemption is something of a theme in the book, as Nemo himself is redeemed on his deathbed when we finally hear his origin story.
What happened?
Yeah, we covered that in Chapter 1, but let's just take a minute here to cover the Disney film. In Search of Castaways, the film has an odd tone. Hayley Mills, of the Parent Trap fame, who is finishing up with her Disney contract, plays the sister.
I'm Mary Grant, and this is my brother Robert.
And they go off with their French uncle, who's this real weird character to find their parents. Many of these Verne-style stories share this quest angle, and they often feature a scientist, which this one does as well, but In Search of Castaways attempts to combine many areas of Verne's expertise. Ocean liner ships, climbing mountains, and even erupting volcanoes with a Disney brand of optimism, which is nice, but not really reading the room.
The whole world. No place has such big, such beautiful, such magnificent earthquakes as right here. But it is one chance in a million. We should be so fortunate.
Yeah, and the only thing that makes that guy happier is when they actually get caught in an earthquake.
An earthquake of the first magnitude.
Keep in mind, the entire adventure is to find their missing parents, and he seems to treat the entire thing with this spoonful of sugar type attitude, singing songs.
Oh, don't be afraid of the beautiful Anaheim Mountain. Let's climb, let's climb, let's climb, let's climb, let's climb.
The entire movie is charmingly silly at times, with a mountain sled scene more ridiculous than Temple of Doom, and okay, back to Mysterious Island. At some point, we're going to have to touch on the incongruity of the timeline between the two novels.
We might as well do it.
Okay. Mysterious Island is set during the American Civil War, which ended in 1865, making it take place 1 year before 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, which takes place in 1866, despite Nemo being 20 years older now. And my theory is that when last seen in 20,000 Leagues, the Nautilus was being swallowed by a deadly whirlpool, seemingly without hope, unless Nemo had another piece of experimental technology that he would use to throw the Nautilus back in time. And it wouldn't just go back 1 year to the mysterious island, right? Because he's already an old man, so clearly he escaped the swirling abyss, traveled back in time with his experimental time-jumping technology, maybe putting him 20 or 30 years before the mysterious island, giving him plenty of time to have more adventures. And of course, that's totally ludicrous and silly, but we're also talking about a Victorian-era idea of science fiction, the height of which is a submarine and seaweed cigars. I kind of think my idea is a little bit more fun. So there, I fixed it. You're welcome.
What? Are you crazy?
Yeah, well, there's an entirely different cast as well. Union soldiers who escape the Confederate prison in an air balloon. They get caught up in a storm and come down on the island, where a series of inexplicable events keep happening to them. It's ultimately revealed to be Nemo's island, and we find him there near the end of his life. The 5 main characters in the book are Cyrus Harding, our scientific leader, his ex-slave, Neb, whom he freed, Pencroft and his protege, or son, and journalist Gideon Spilett. The different adaptations will make various changes to the basic characters, like adding a Confederate to the crew for tension, or giving it the old Lord of the Rings treatment by adding women to the cast, to balance out an exclusively male-dominated story written at a time where I guess dudes only wanted to read about other dudes, I guess?
Oh, what are you, a comedian?
Clearly not. And there are some plot events in the novel that never get the cinematic treatment. Like, most adaptations won't include their pet dog, Top. Dogs are difficult or tricky to work with on set, and nothing's really gained by including him anyway. Or the part where Nemo intervenes to save Top the dog from a manatee.
Are you guys friends? Hi there, Mr. Manatee. Look at you. Oh my gosh.
Right? Or their domesticated ape, Jup. J-U-P, Jup. I mean, I'm not making that up. They find a monkey, they domesticate him, he becomes their friend, and then there's an earthquake, the ground splits open and swallows Jup. Yes, they killed the monkey. The monkey died.
The pussy there.
No, it was a monkey. Now, just like in 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, where the Disney version is just straight up the definitive version, not to be challenged, there's also a definitive mysterious island, in my mind at least. I mentioned it all the way back in Chapter 1. You can go watch it if you want.
No, we've gone too far.
Fair. But before we get to what I think is the definitive version, which can and I'm sure will be rightly disputed, we've just got a few other early adaptations to mention. The very first is in 1929. It took 3 years to film due to all kinds of problems, not the least of which would be the advent of talking movie pictures, and yet this incarnation of the mysterious island is possibly one of the most audacious. It was released as a silent picture. It was also released with parts in sound because it was right on the precipice between those two technologies. It was also filmed in color, at least partly, and has been preserved as such with only 1 or 2 prints remaining. But as of filming this video, all that's been made available to us is a black and white, part talkie, part silent DVD, and that's not even the most audacious part. It's not even a budget issue, to be honest. This first adaptation of The Mysterious Island is actually more of a prequel to 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. It uses the backstory of Prince Dakkar and how he built the Nautilus, but everything else in The Mysterious Island you could just chuck out completely. Nemo's only named as Prince Dakkar the Kingdom of Hetvia. He's a white guy, sort of a rich, crazy scientist, and while the name wouldn't mean much to an average movie watcher today, the actor who played him, Lionel Barrymore, was an Academy Award-winning actor of the time.
Quite too overcome and proud to say anything but thank you very much.
They also did a big giant octopus too. I think all in all, the 1929 prequel to 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea is a great chapter in film history. It's so bizarre to think that they would adapt something without really even adapting it at all, and the final results are pretty unique. The first adaptation with sound is a Russian production in 1941. I didn't get any subtitles for this version, but the story was familiar, and I kind of wish there was subs because it's a pretty cool production. I'll just give you a couple snippets of the Nautilus, the Nemo, and underwater stuff, and I think we can just move on from there.
Неужели тот профессор, которого судьба забросила ко мне на борт 16 лет тому назад, он выпустил книгу, но и судно научилось и навсегда исчез под водой. Я посетил все моря, от полюса до полюса. В этих неизведанных морских...
For 5 days and nights they were blown southwestward. Not once could they see the Earth.
Now in 1951, there's a 15-part serial. It's about 4 hours long in total, fairly cheap production, but it's fun.
Who are you? I am Captain Nemo. Captain Nemo? The great scientist and commander of the submarine Nautilus.
And it reuses costumes from the other serials of the time, namely The Spider's Web and Flash Gordon. This production is odd because it adds aliens, alien invaders, to the plot. They're the Mercurians. This is a theme with many interpretations of the mysterious island. It's almost a tradition now to add some kind of extra twist to the classic novel. Sometimes it's women added to the cast, sometimes it's adding a Confederate soldier to create conflict, and sometimes it's aliens. Luckily, Nemo has a weapon to fight the Martians.
I've been trying to perfect a machine which will block their plans, but it is not yet completed. Everyone thought you were lost. My ship and crew were, but I survived to reach this island. I'd hoped to spend my remaining years in peace, but invaders came from another planet. And now I must fight their plan to destroy the Earth.
Many people would identify this production as the Cy Enfield Mysterious Island because he's the director, but to me this will always be Ray Harryhausen's take on the island. Harryhausen's going to loom large over any director he worked with, seeing as his stamp of stop motion. Those special effects are so indelibly etched onto those films, and this one is really no different. The stop motion monsters, being giant crabs and bees, give the movie such a whimsical adventure genre appeal. It's very easy to slip from a Mysterious Island marathon into a Ray Harryhausen film fest, and I kind of had to stop myself from doing it. I would have done The Three Sinbads, Jason and the Argonauts, and 20 Million Miles to Earth. I know a lot of people would probably have added Clash of the Titans, and they're right, it's great and everything, but to me it's a little darker than the other ones. It's kind of heavy. Does that make any sense?
You cannot predict the workings of an insane mind.
While most people's favorite, or at least my favorite, would have been the Harryhausen version, Vernians might find more satisfaction with the 1973 Omar Sharif version, if you can find it.
Why do you say that?
Well, there are numerous versions of this production, and none got the physical media treatment, at least that I could find. This is a co-production between Spain, Italy, and France. It was shot as intended as a mini-series with a runtime of 268 minutes. That's 4.5 hours. There's also a 96-minute version and a 2.5-hour version on Super 8 that's the hardest to find. For example, I did manage to find and download a version for it, which was the full 4.5 hours. It was dubbed in German with English subtitles, and I watched the entire thing. Different versions of the movie have different shots. They have different models and different miniatures that got used due to a skittish producer who gave up on the entire idea of filming a mini-series for a truncated theatrical version. And after he went rogue, the rest of the production just continued on as planned. So whether it was for TV or theatrical and in what country you were at, you could have any different version of this production. They don't even get into the balloon for at least a half hour in, and it's kind of funny that they gave away the mystery right at the beginning when they say it's Nemo's Island so early on. That actually becomes something of a trend moving forward. Now that these novels are old classics, the mysteries are more for the characters, while the audience waits for them to put the pieces together. I don't know that this is the better way to do things, but Nemo is a key role and each production casts a big name, so hiding away their big star doesn't really make much sense. But I imagine this would have been amazing to watch on TV in the 70s. The costumes and the sets for the Nautilus, the interiors, they're all pretty lavish and magnificent. And they really take their Nemo tech seriously. Just don't look directly at it while it's flashing, okay? Told you. But they did the monkey, though, right? Like, that's pretty tight. They had a pet monkey, and they did it on set, and yeah, they also kill the monkey just like in the book, which is pretty hardcore. Poor little monkey.
Poor little Pinkus.
Is just dropping a Seinfeld reference shamelessly into the clip transition enough to get us to the 90s?
Werden Sie glücklich unter den Menschen.
With 22 episodes, this mid-90s TV series gives us the longest runtime by far of all the adaptations. The cliffhanger endings of the 1951 serial are back here, though there are no Mercurians. This is a pretty straight adaptation of the book, though they do give Pencroft a wife. With so many episodes, there's plenty of time to explore the various adventures described in the book, and even more. Neb eats berries and goes blind in one episode, Spilett gets trapped under a rock during a rock slide, and Harding has to make explosives using basic chemistry of minerals and chemicals that he has on hand. The reveal of Nemo himself is only surprising in that it's Nemo. There's a creepy old man with a goatee, silently spying on them from his lair in every episode before giving his name, which ends up not being his name, right? At first it might seem like it's a little too PBS or Hallmark quality, a little hokey, but after about 6 episodes, it starts to suck you in. So if you want 17 hours of the mysterious island, this is the one that you want. This is a 2-part made-for-TV movie starring Patrick Stewart as Nemo and Kyle MacLachlan playing Cyrus Smith. It's not a Harding, they just changed it to Smith. The duo had previously worked together 20 years previously on Dune.
I'm not in the mood.
Not in the mood. Mood's a thing for cattle and love play.
This was made during a small wave of these 2-part TV events that revisit literary fantasy adventure classics. Similarly, we saw a 2-part Treasure Island with Elijah Wood, a 2-part reinterpretation of Peter Pan with Neverland, another with The Wizard of Oz called Tin Man in 2007, and Alice doing Alice in Wonderland in 2009.
And he is completely shot out of a cannon.
This time, the island looks like Scaramanga's and the Man with a Golden Gun. Director Russell Mulcahy lends his expert eye in the production. Mulcahy is known for Crazy Insane List of music videos and really pioneering that entire genre, but he's also directed Highlander 1 and 2, Resident Evil 3, The Shadow with Alec Baldwin in '94, and Give 'Em Hell Malone. The cast is filled out with a pirate Vinnie Jones and Omar Gooding, who I always remember from Baby Boy, maybe because he was really good in that. Stewart makes his on-screen appearance about a half hour in, and with this early reveal, the mystery of the island seems to lean more into the big monsters, even if they're just big grasshoppers. It's a nice homage to Harryhausen, but Ray just did it way better. Yeah, and I know I said I wouldn't harp on about this too much, but that little head wrap thingy totally looks like some serious cultural appropriation.
I was born an Englishman, but I was raised in India.
Yeah? Well, your special effects still suck. Now, this time out, the balloon goes through a weird energy portal that takes them to the island. This allows them to bring the ladies into the plot who come from modern-day 2012.
You know, Sergeant, in the future, where I'm from, the President of the United States is black.
Oh, boy. I don't believe that.
This movie was in production just after the TV series Lost finished its run. There's so much that overlaps in aesthetics here. Weird sci-fi portals that bringing different eras of time to one tropical island where the strangers meet and are attacked by unknown, unseen beasts in the jungle. I told you that time travel was not too far out of an idea. This could have been done better, but at least in the Vernian parts, we get a little bit of dignity in the cast.
Oh, forgive me. I'm Captain Nemo. Welcome to my island.
Nemo?
Yeah, W. Morgan Shepard, who I always remember from Elvira like this.
Swine.
Note of interest, by the way, the director is Mark Shepard, who is the son of Morgan Shepard, and also he plays the younger version of Nemo in the flashbacks. With all the liberties taken, it's safe to say that this isn't the most authentic to the source material. The budget isn't impressive, but I think that the low IMDb consensus hovering around a 3 is because of the ending, which is disappointing to say the least. They escape the island. Big surprise, right? In any other movie, you could get away with riding off into the sunset in the balloon, but check out the very last shot as we go through the time door.
That which is far off and exceeding deep, who can find out?
What the Shepard did his best, I'm sure. What else? Gina Holden and Lachlan Monroe to the actors. They're both from British Columbia. Just randomly watched Peacemaker Season 1 while working on this video, and Lachlan Monroe is also in that as one of the cops or the FBI agents, and it's also filmed in Vancouver. I'm just saying.
Let's just recap. We are on an island lost in time, inhabited by flesh-eating swamp things, invaded by pirates, that houses a volcano and is stalked by a giant octopus? Does that about sum it up?
Pretty much. It could also be that the producers were racing to beat another big Hollywood production that was on the way, because only 1 year later we got our last film in this chapter. The final mysterious island on our tour is a bit of an oddity. It's not strictly an adaptation. It doesn't even have a Captain Nemo in it, although it does have a Michael Caine playing a wily grandpa character, and he did play Nemo in the 1997 20,000 Leagues we discussed in the last chapter.
Let me warn you, the heart of this island is full of jagged mountains, dark jungles, and terrifying creatures who will give you nightmares. So, who's up for an adventure?
So here's the deal. This is a sequel to the Brendan Fraser vehicle Journey to the Center of the Earth. But instead of trying to write another cave diving expedition, they cleverly shifted to another novel, hence Journey to, the Mysterious Island. This was a repurposed spec script called Mysterious Travels, which had the clever idea that the island written about in Gulliver's Travels, Treasure Island, and the Mysterious Island are all the same island, and it's real. Though the plot is barely an adaptation, it's close enough to include for fun. Now, Brendan Fraser doesn't return, but the kid does. Josh Hutcherson teams up with his stepdad, The Rock, to go looking for his grandpa, Michael Caine, with comic relief from Luis Guzman and his daughter, played by Vanessa Hudgens. They find themselves on the mysterious island and going through a number of classic sequences from the novel, as well as different versions of the movies. Giant bees, it's a nice nod to Harryhausen, though this production goes the Honey, I Shrunk the Kids route, riding them. It's charmingly dropping lots of little Verne references, but also suffering through some very childish gags with Luis Guzman. But that's the temperature of this movie. It's very family-oriented.
Talk about paradise!
Though that also makes very weird scenes like the Peck Pop of Love scene all the more uncomfortable.
That is the Peck Pop of Love. Now go on and throw a berry.
No. Go on and throw a berry. There's some right behind you. Grab one and throw it.
Go ahead, grab a bunch. Rapid fire right now.
I'm not doing rapid fire.
They will not stop until you feed them.
Feed them? No.
Feed them. They're hungry.
I'll feed them.
Atta boy, come get some.
Okay, you ready? Ready? Here we go. Oh, 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 oh.
It also shot in 3D. In the next chapter, we're going to look at all the movies and TV series with Captain Nemo that were not based on the plots of Jules Verne's novels. Original stories, and I bet even the bad ones are good.